Our next session is going to be everything about multiple choice questions, any suggestions and tips involving those, and APHG teacher and co-founder of the TeenMaptivists Initiative, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be heralding this section for us. So I will pass it over to Ms. Celeste Reynolds at this time.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you, Lisa. That was a great introduction, and so excited to be here with all of you tonight. My camera is not working, so you're going to have to just listen to my voice. So first slide, please. Thank you. So tonight, I was hoping to kind of talk about kind of what to expect with the multiple choice question portion of the exam, and kind of look at multiple choice question strategies with your students, just because I know my students say, I really thought I knew the content, and then they get their exams back and then they start looking and going, I can't believe I missed that. So kind of helping students kind of look at their questions a little bit differently, and what does that look like? And then practice, practice, practice. So next slide, please. So just like Lisa said, it's going to be 60 multiple choice questions in 60 minutes. And I have to remind myself as a teacher that many of my students might be taking multiple AP exams. And so they have different exam structures. So they always come in like, how many questions again? How many minutes do I have? So just kind of keep reiterating. I actually have a poster in my classroom because they're taking 3 or 4 APs. So I always have to kind of remind them, and also let them know too that, you know, some AP exams have 4 responses to their multiple choice questions, but ours has 5. So just remind them of that because it can get a little confusing for them, and they'll be like, well, such and such AP has 4. Well, ours has 5. And then letting them know, just like Lisa was talking about, that there are multiple choice questions without stimulus. There'll be some with stimulus, and you're going to have these item sets. And this is where you're going to have a stimulus with 2 or 3 questions, and you're probably going to see several of those. And making sure that you're giving your students an opportunity to practice with those sets of questions with a stimulus, and they have 2 to 3 questions that go along with that stimulus. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, there we go. So one of the things you want to help with your students is talking about reading that entire question and really kind of looking at what is the question asking you. Read all the answer choices. That's also important too. You don't want to rush through it because there's going to be distractors there. And how do you get through those distractors to find the best answer? And using that process of elimination, and then making sure that through that elimination of the process of elimination that they're selecting the best answer. And then if they get stuck on a question that they don't know, to move on, that they always can come back, even on the digital exam. Just remind them they can move back and forth on that. And I always like to tell my students, if you don't know it and you're spending a lot of time trying to think about what the right answer is, move on. And then you might get clues, or another question might remind you of what the right answer would be on that other question. And you can always come back to it. So that's important too. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm throwing this up here because this is from your CED. But once again, I always tell my students that yes, there are course skills, there's content, but there's also course skills that are being integrated. So they're asking, not only do you know this, but they're also seeing seeing what kind of skill. So that's kind of something that I always show this to my students. I have this up on my board in my classroom, and kind of talking exactly what Lisa was talking about, that there's some beginner, there's some intermediate, and then there's more advanced. And helping students kind of understanding, because if you look at these skills, right, your tasking verbs are right there. And so I'm always asking my students, well, what skill, we know what content, where is this coming from? Unit 5. Okay, what skill is it asking you? It's asking me to describe. So if you get them to start looking at this and understanding that, then they can begin to strategize how they're going to find the best possible answer. Next slide, please. So here's a great question where you have a stimulus here, and it's kind of having your students look at it. They're looking at the question. If you don't mind clicking it one more time, Annika, there we go. And this is kind of where I would say, okay, to my students, let's read the question. The image shows a religious structure in Mexico City, which the following conclusions can be drawn based on the image. So I would say, okay, what topic is this coming from? My students will say, oh, Unit 3. And then also, what skill is it? And this one is looking at explain patterns, because it's asking them to look at this visual source and draw a conclusion about what they're seeing. So this is, if you can click one more time, Annika, thank you. So here's the correct answer, but helping them walk through that and kind of getting them to think in this concept of what unit is this coming from and what is it asking me? Because there could be potentially two correct answers. One might be better than the other. It could be some distractors, but that's what you kind of want to help them kind of start to see when they're reading their questions. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's an example of a multiple choice with no stimulus. And if you look at it, you read the question like the 19th century immigration of a large number of Swedes from a particular region of Sweden to the Santee County of Minnesota as a result of communications from friends and relatives who preceded them. There's an example of, and then you have to say, okay, and if you can click one more time, thank you. You can see here that the content is coming from Unit 2, and the skill that we're asking them to do is the 1D, describing a relevant geographic concept. So it's kind of going back and we see the example of, and so they're like, okay, I got to find an example. So as you click through, is it brain drain? No. Could be chain migration? No. Oh, yeah. And then net migration. And so you can kind of go through all of these and start to eliminate as you realize that what the answer is looking for through the process of elimination. And it's good to do these kinds of questions. If you can click one more time, it goes in and chain migration is the answer. So kind of helping your students, like putting up a few multiple choice questions up on the board and going over, maybe you can have students in groups, or you can do it as a class, depending on how big your classes or small your classes, and kind of helping them with that thought process will help them kind of learn how to read those questions a little bit closer. Okay, next slide, please. So here's another example of a multiple choice with stimulus. And if you can click one more time. Oh, okay. I guess if you can go back, sorry about that. I thought I had put some arrows in, but if you try to show them how read what the stimulus is asking, what does the stimulus have, then read your question, okay? And then say, okay, where is this question coming from? Well, this is coming from Unit 6. Awesome. Okay. And then what skill is it asking? And if you underline the tasking verb in the question, it's asking you to compare. So now the students are going to be tuned in a little bit more. So if you hit the button, does it? There we go. Okay, so my things aren't in there. So it's going to be C. I had a little process of elimination like I did on the other ones, but might not have transferred. My apologies. So kind of helping your students read that stimulus, kind of know look at the title of the stimulus. What kind of information is on the stimulus that they should be looking at, and then reading the question, and then going through each choice, reading it. And the reason I chose this one is that here is a perfect example. If you look at question A and answer A and answer E, those are good distractors. And those are so if you read China has a primate city and the United States follows the rank size rule, but then you look at the United States has a primate city and China follows the rank size rule. So those are two great distractors for students, because they're like, oh, maybe one of those are right. Which one's right? And, as they're trying to figure it out, and what is rank size rule, and oh my gosh, and you can hear them starting to kind of, I think it's this, I think it's that. But those are two distractors, and that might distract them and think that one of those might be the answer, but it isn't. So kind of helping them kind of be aware of that and say, oh no, it's the United States is close to following the rank size rule is the correct answer. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a multiple choice stimulus item set, and I put all three questions in there so that you can kind of see uh, what those look like. And remember, in these item sets, and Lisa spoke about these, is that they can be beginner, intermediate, and advanced skills as the questions move on. They also could be beginner, beginner, advanced, or they could be intermediate, intermediate, advanced. So just kind of make sure you're giving your students a lot of practice on these. And I will say this, that when I put the percentage amount of these kinds of questions in my exams, my students are like, wow, those really take up time, because you're looking at the stimulus and then you're answering the question. And so giving them time to, work on those questions so that they can get the time down. So this one is a satellite image. So make sure you're trying to give as many different kinds of stimulus for them. Some are photographs, try to give some satellite images, try to give some, tables, try to give as many multiple different kinds. I like this one because this is a satellite image and kind of, what is it? What do you see? What do you think you see? And then going back and reading through the question, and this is an explain. So this question, if you look at it, it is coming from Unit 5 and walking your students, saying, technologies invented during which of the following periods, explain how farmland was divided and cultivated as shown in the satellite image. So you say, okay, where's this coming from? Unit 5. Awesome. Great job, guys. So where's our tasking verb? It's explain. Okay, so this is a more advanced question. So which one? And let's read the different ones. And as you're reading through, would it be this? Would it be that? And having them an opportunity to kind of help with that thought process. And if you go to the next slide, the correct answer is C, the second agricultural revolution. So this is kind of these kinds of opportunities and kind of showing them these kinds of questions is very important. Next slide, please. So here's the second of this item set. And once again, they're using the satellite image, and it's still coming from Unit 5 when you read the question. However, this is the terms identify. So this is a more beginner type of skill that they're asking the student to do. And this is also going to help your students really understand what the question is asking. So I think that that's really important because a lot of times I will find my students will look at their exams and say, I knew that answer. Why did I answer this? And so I hear that quite a bit. And so I think that that's really important to kind of help our students, when you're reading the questions, what words to point out and what is that tasking verb so that you can find that best question or the best answer. So on this one, it would be township and range. Next question. Next slide. There it is. Okay, let's go to the last question for this set. So once again, we have that satellite image. And on this question, it is in reading the landscape of the image, a geographer will most likely describe the land survey pattern shown as typical of which of the following locations. So as you go through, oh, look, it is a rural agricultural region in the United States. Hopefully you've kind of shown them multiple types of satellite image of different parts of the United States and the world. And they get, say, yeah, that looks pretty good. Would it be an exurb of Paris? Probably not, because if it was, we'd probably see a little bit more urban. Is it a coastal region of China? Maybe, but probably not. Why? Well, we might see an ocean, right? So if it's coastal, it's ocean. Do we see a big land of water? No. And then agricultural region of Eastern Canada. And so would it? It could be, but it probably isn't, because if you think about it, this is hopefully when you're talking about different kinds of agricultural settlements. In the French influenced the way that land was distributed in Canada. So they have more of the long lot system. So that doesn't really look like what you would see in Canada. And then, is it a rainforest development in southern Brazil? And it's like, is it that organized in forest in Brazil? No, that's probably going to look a little not as organized as what we're seeing here. So the correct, if you go to the next slide, the correct answer is A. So next slide, please. So I think it's one of those things that I have students that are just so worried about uh, making mistakes. And I think that's probably very typical of a student in our AP Human Geography, and they lose confidence. And I think that's one of the things I like to say is that it's our job. Like I say, I'm your coach to get you through this class and get you ready and get you prepared for game day, test day. So I think they get really tough on themselves about missing questions. And I always say, no, you got to look at it a little differently. Missing questions on a practice exam or if you're in class, it doesn't mean that you don't know the material. It just means that it's kind of helps you start taking inventory of the things that you need to focus on when you're studying and the things that you already feel very confident on. So I always say it's always good to say, what do I know already and what do I need to focus on as I'm studying? And then remind students that it's okay to make mistakes. That's what studying is all about. You want to make those mistakes in practice, and those mistakes are going to help you learn a little bit more. That's part of the learning process. And when you make those mistakes and you reflect on those mistakes, you'll probably are not going to make those when the test comes. So those mistakes help you improve. Next slide, please. So I always say, try to give your students practice, practice, practice as much as you can. And there's all sorts of resources for you. First of all, you have AP Classroom. You have AP Classroom has official AP practice tests and questions. Try to give your students, if you can, an opportunity to take those practice tests with the 60 minutes and a time limit, and then 75 minutes for their FRQs. But just try to give them as much practice as possible. You can make short quizzes. You can do activities in class, looking over questions like we did tonight, kind of walking through all of those. There's study apps. I always recommend my students downloading the iScore 5. They're always on their phones, right? So I always say, if you're on your phone for 15 minutes, do the iScore 5 app and answer some questions. The more you see, the more you're reviewing, the more mistakes you make, the more you're going to learn. There's the review books. There's lots of them. AMSCO is a great one. And that also practice questions and in-depth review sections if students need a little extra, more explanations. And then there's online platforms as well. So I just want to say that you got this, and just try to give your students as many opportunities to practice, 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 and they'll learn from all of that practice so that they'll get the best score possible. So thank you. And if anyone has any questions, just let me know.